Whooping Crane Chronicles is a collection of stories to learn from, to ponder, and to celebrate. I'm Mike Forsberg, a conservation photographer from the Great Plains. I've spent the last 5 years, camera in hand, exploring the natural history of whooping cranes across the continent, meeting the people who love them, and discovering how these tall, magnificent, and rarest of cranes are navigating our 21st century world. This podcast elevates conservation stories and uplifts these birds to showcase their natural history and beauty in the hope of keeping these birds around for generations to come. Join me on the journey. Hello and welcome to the Whooping Crane Chronicles. Today we are at the transition of the Loess Hills and Southern Sandhills near Arcadia, Nebraska. This is an agricultural region with row crop farming, beef production, hay meadows, and so much more, which we'll learn about today. And we are right along the beautiful Loup River that eventually flows into the Platte River near Columbus, Nebraska. We're joined today by the Pierson family. So Andrew Pierson was, for a time, the Director of Conservation for Audubon, Nebraska, based out of Audubon's Row Sanctuary, where we just recorded another podcast. Before returning home to help out his folks, Conn and Donna, who are here with us also, and raise his family here. His sister and her family are right around the hill. Everybody's pointing that direction, which I've learned is not east but west. I've never been turned around in Nebraska before, and all of a sudden I am completely messed up. Anyway, Andrew, Conn, and Donna, thanks for joining us today. Yes, we usually start these podcasts. We like our listeners to learn a little bit about who the folks are that we're talking to. So, Conn, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is, and how are you rooted here in Nebraska?
Well, I'm pretty rooted because I've been here all my life. I've been on this river within about 2 miles of right here since I was 5.
I'll be darned, and you're 49 now?
Well, I had 21 today.
All right.
But, we moved here when I was 5, it would have been in 60. And I lived on that place until I graduated from high school, and then lived in Arcadia just for a few years after we were married, and then moved right back out here within a mile of this place. And then in 2003, we built here and moved here.
And here is perched up on a hill.
Yeah, a half mile from the Middle Loup River, and
yeah.
We really enjoy the view and fishing and everything that comes along with it.
Yeah. Well, who's this person sitting to your left here?
Well, Donna used to be Staub, but Donna Pierson now. And what is it? Next year it's 50 years.
Yeah, 50 years. Wow.
So,
well, congratulations. And how are you going to celebrate 50 years?
Don't want to talk. These guys have planned things. And
I see.
I'm a home buddy, and they're taking off and going somewhere.
Dragging you with, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
good.
say so, anyway.
Well, Donna, where'd you grow up?
Well, about 15 miles to the east, a rural area called Meyer Valley.
Okay.
And then my dad bought the welding shop here in Arcadia, so we moved when I was in 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And Conn started riding his horse over to our place. And so we've known each other since we were in grade school.
Wow. So now why were you riding the horse over there?
Well, at the time, she's got a brother that's a year older.
Uh-huh.
And that was the reason I was going then.
I see.
Well, so...
You have siblings?
Yes, I have 4 other siblings, a
Okay.
brother and 3 sisters, and 3 of us live here in Arcadia, around Arcadia, but the other 2 are away. But
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of the Pierson and extended clan around
Yeah.
these parts, right?
I've got an older sister that lives right here and a younger sister that lives in town, and then my younger brother lives in Omaha.
Okay. Well, and I think when we were driving in, when we came up your long driveway here, the sign said that this was established in 1881. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't this actual place where we're at, but just a mile down the road was the actual homestead that my great grandfather homesteaded.
Yeah. Okay. And Pierson, that's O-N, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So is that Swede?
Swedish.
Yeah. If you're Ian, you'd be Danish, right? At least that's how it works in my family
Yeah.
on my side. So, well, Donna, who's the guy sitting next to you?
Well, so this is our oldest, Andrew, and his kids will be the 6th generation
Goodness sakes.
for the Pierson farm. And then we have a daughter, Cammie, and her family live just right up the hill too. So
And how many kids do they have?
they have 3 boys, and Andrew has 1 girl that's the oldest of the grandkids and 2 boys. So
How old is she?
She is 12.
12. All right.
Will be in junior high this coming year.
And you guys are just out of school now, right?
Just a week out of school.
Yeah.
Yep.
So does that mean everybody gets to work on the place here? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Everybody's got chores and
Yeah.
we
Well-
do some irrigating, gravity irrigating, so they get involved in having to change rows on the pipes. So
okay. Yeah. So you're using
Yeah.
pipes out here and
Yeah.
opening gates and
Yeah.
and all that. Good.
Well, and Matt, Cammie's husband, has got cattle too, and those kids are helping work cows and stuff already. So,
Well, tell us a little bit about your place, how it operates.
well, we're mainly corn, soybean rotation with alfalfa, and we have a cow-calf herd. Used to have a lot of hogs. That's how we started out. When I started farming, I had hogs, but we got rid of them a few years back when they went to being worth nothing.
Right. Yeah.
So we're just basically the cow-calf herd and then farming.
So Andrew, somebody asked me recently how we met, and I can't remember really our first meeting. I don't know if I knew you before you were at Audubon's Rose Sanctuary or not. Do you remember?
I can't remember for sure. Prior to Rose Sanctuary, we maybe met in passing. I think maybe we met in the panhandle of Nebraska when you were working on your Great Plains book.
And what were you doing out there?
At that time, I would have been working for Bird Conservancy of the Rockies.
That's right. At the time, Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory, right? Rambo?
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was a part of their
That's
stewardship team.
Yeah.
And I did, a lot of work with ferruginous hawks and some of those species that you were
Yeah.
after while you were out there. I think that's the first time I remember maybe meeting you.
Yeah. There was a guy, Larry Snyder, who worked,
Yep.
it was out of Kimball, and
Yep.
we were working on mountain plovers and working with ranchers, and we're paying, well, and farmers too out there, and any mountain plover anybody would find that was nesting out on cropland, you'd put a circle around and they'd get paid $100 if they didn't plow over it,
Yep.
right?
Right.
And
Yep.
that seemed like a pretty ingenious way to keep those birds around, and it worked.
It did work
Yeah.
really well. And I think it is still going on.
Yeah, I
That
think you're
work,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So what's your background, Andrew?
Well, I grew up here on the farm too.
Yeah.
And then went to school at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln and had about a 20-year career in wildlife conservation. Most of that time was either with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies out in western Nebraska and kind of the high plains. And then the latter half of that, 7 or 8 years, with the National Audubon Society.
Okay. Did you get your degree in natural resources or what?
I got a degree in biological sciences.
Okay.
It took me too long to decide just what I wanted to do.
That's all right.
I was very close to an ecology degree, but I would have had to stay for another semester and
Yeah.
I was done.
Yeah.
So I finished with a biology degree and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went to a lecture over a lunch hour with the Student Conservation Association.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I ended up doing. I got a job with the U.S. Forest Service in Idaho that I drove to the day after graduation.
Gosh.
And had a biologist job in Idaho for a while, and then slowly moved my way back to Nebraska.
What'd your folks think about your job in Idaho?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember what I thought back then. I kind of
It's a little different territory.
it was. And
Yeah.
I had never been to the mountains or anything hardly, and it was a big change. But it was very fun work.
So when you were working for Audubon, Nebraska, and you were based at Roe Sanctuary, you got to see a lot of cranes,
Right.
obviously, right? Yeah.
Yep.
But I bet you had seen cranes before you were there.
Yes, I have memories of being a kid. We were just talking about it, of sandhill cranes. We lived just down the road here in a house that's not there anymore. But I remember one time in particular, and I'm sure it was in March, and we were probably calving, but I was a pretty little kid, and I remember like a gray day like we have today, being out on our creek that we have, and there just being a ton of sandhill cranes.
Sandhill crane.
I'm sure they had come down because of the weather or something, but I have a really vivid memory of driving through those cranes in the pasture and them just letting us drive right through them. And
Isn't that something?
they're so straight, they're so big, and it was gray day and gray
Yeah.
birds. And, when cranes are nervous, like all their heads move exactly
Yeah.
the same. And I just remember it being so strange driving through those birds. But so I remember seeing cranes once in a while growing up. Not whooping cranes, but sandhill cranes. And for sure, every spring and fall, we heard cranes.
I think, when people talk about cranes and migration in Nebraska, everyone thinks of the Platte for good reason. But there's not just one river in the state that these birds use. So we're sitting north of the Platte, but not very far on the loop system. So could you,
Sure.
for our listeners, set the geography,
Yep.
describe the
Well, so
ladder?
there's about a 90-mile stretch of Platte River.
Yeah.
That's sort of where all the cranes funnel through. We are dead center of that 90 miles and just about an hour straight north. So as all these cranes funnel through the Central Flyway and hit that stretch of the Platte River, we're just kind of a quick hop to the north of there. And so we get the benefit of that big bottleneck up here. We're on the Middle Loop River here, and the North Loop is just over a couple sets of hills. And the Loop River system is really similar to the Platte. It's wide, braided, sandbars most of the year.
Yeah.
It resembles the Platte quite a lot. And so if birds do make it here, they find a really similar habitat as they find on the Platte.
I was talking to your dad just a bit ago about if he had any secret fishing spots out there, and he said no, because the river always changes and you have to find the new ones every year, right?
Yep.
Sandy bottom,
Yep.
and so
And
forth.
this river is just keeps getting wider and wider because ice goes out every spring, and it just keeps washing wider and wider. And from back when I was a kid, it wasn't near this wide, and it was evidently deeper because you used to have a lot of good creeks coming off of the river that you could fish in and so on. And now none of those creeks exist anymore because the river has gotten lower, and you just don't have that.
Yep.
It's just wider and flatter.
Yeah. Always changing.
Yep.
And I think most folks don't know that, unless if you look at it on a map, the loop system is responsible for draining most of the sandhills of Nebraska. And so if you go stand out in your river here, you do have water that's coming from rain clouds in the sky and snowmelt. But a lot of that water is coming from the aquifer underground, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're really lucky that we're fed as much water as we are from the sandhills.
Yeah.
We got a pretty steady source of water.
Yeah. Yeah. Our project is housed at the School of Natural Resources at the University of Nebraska East Campus. We have students that are in our project, students in our class, that some of them are wearing seed corn caps, some of them are wearing cowboy hats, some of them are bona fide tree huggers. You get a whole diversity of kids in that School of Natural Resources. That should be the way that it is. And a lot of them are from Nebraska, not all of them. And a lot of them come from more rural backgrounds. So some of them are not going to stay on the farm or the ranch where they came from, but there's a lot of them that want to, or know that they want to come back someday. So you, Andrew, have walked in those shoes. Be interesting to hear what you have to say maybe to that generation of kids now.
Well, for the first half of sort of my conservation career, the various jobs that I had were all working with landowners, and I was sort of a liaison to all of the various conservation programs that are out there that they could utilize to do on their farm or ranch. And so I spent a lot of time visiting with farmers and ranchers and being on their properties, and most of those folks reached out to us with something they wanted to do, all voluntary. And so I always loved that part of my job. And these ranchers and farmers, just true conservationists, in all honesty. They either were already doing a ton of great things or were looking for help to do great things for wildlife. And I always left those meetings just really feeling good. And often I left them thinking, why am I not home on my farm and ranch doing the same things? And here toward the end of my time at Audubon, one of the programs that I got to work on was a conservation ranching program. And all of a sudden I was going on these trips again and meeting ranchers. And that was kind of the tipping point. I just decided that I wanted to be doing these same things that I was helping other producers work on. And so I think that there is plenty of overlap between conservation work and farming or ranching. And I've always been interested in conservation since I was a kid here on the farm. And I think it was sort of a full circle thing. It took me leaving to realize that I could get everything that I got out of my conservation career coming back and farming. All of the rewarding parts I feel like I still have. So there's plenty of room for those conservation-minded or conservation priority people in the agricultural community. And I think that just in general, agriculture is moving that direction. I don't feel like I really left my conservation job or my conservation world coming back here.
Well, I don't think they have to be two things. They can be one thing.
Right.
Yep. We're pretty good at drawing divides.
Yep.
Right. And it's about time we start wrapping back around to drawing together, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we've been talking for a while. We haven't talked about the big white birds yet. So we probably better get to that. So I'm going to ask each of you to talk about the first time you remember seeing a whooping crane. It doesn't have to be here, but Donna, I think I'll start with you first, because over my right shoulder here, there's that's maybe not the first time, but there is a beautiful photograph of whooping cranes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it looks like one of them maybe is a juvenile.
Yeah.
Beautiful photograph, worthy of framing on your wall. So I know you've seen them.
Well, I don't recollect very often seeing any whooper crane till we moved up here. Mm-hmm. And Andrew always kept us aware, said, this is when they'll be coming back through. And it was a fall, October 28th, because we had our church dinner that day. And then I saw them from up here. And we have a lot of pelicans, and we have other white birds. So I called Andrew, and I says, geez, I think these are whooping cranes. And he says, oh, no. And I says, well, they're so tall, they can't be, some other white bird here. And so he says, well, don't disturb them. That's illegal. And so I took my camera, and I went down there, and they were in the river at the time when I saw them. And I got too close, and they flew. And I had my camera open to the little screen, and
Yeah.
it was so bright out I couldn't see nothing on there. And so I just put my camera in the air and started clicking, and I just moved it all over.
And you got that photograph?
And when I was going through, I had one with 10 in it.
Goodness sakes.
And I sent it to him, and he says, "Oh my, that's the biggest group altogether for, that was back when they
Well,
were extinct."
So when was that roughly? I mean, what you said October 28th, but what year
in
was that?
2007, wasn't it on that picture?
6 or
think-
7.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
almost 20 years
Yeah.
ago, and
Yeah.
there were a lot less whooping cranes back then.
So, yeah, we were lucky to get that.
Gosh, and that was in the fall.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of people talk about cranes moving through Nebraska, and they hear about the spring,
Mm-hmm.
but you just got this big international highway in the sky that these birds, all birds, it's
Yeah.
like a big parade.
Yeah.
Moving up and down 2 times a year between wintering grounds and nesting grounds. So
When we
and-
were going through our pictures, we were trying to see if we had more sightings in the spring than the fall, but
Mm-hmm.
I think they're pretty even.
pretty even. huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
Well, Conn, do you remember the first time you saw
Well,
whooping cranes?
I think it was probably right here when we were building or getting ready to build the house here. I remember the guys bringing in the electricity, the poles down, and they had their survey
scope.
scope or whatever, and they brought it up here, and I had seen this whooping crane on the river and said something to them, and they were looking at it through that
Their instrument
telescope
there,
thing,
really?
yeah.
Wow.
and we're watching it, and I got to watch it too. And but at that time, I'm sure it was just one that was here,
Yeah.
and that's the first that I for sure remember seeing it, because, like I said, I've been on this river forever and seen a lot of sandhill cranes, but that's the first time that I know that it was a whooper.
And that was when you were building the house here. So when was that about?
2003.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And how about you, Andrew?
I can't remember the first whooping crane I've seen. I remember the first time I saw whooping cranes while I was working. I had a temporary job with Nebraska Game and Parks in the Sandhills, and I remember getting sent out to check on whooping crane reports from the public.
You were the confirmation guy, right?
Right.
And
And
sure
so
it's not something else.
Yep. And so I remember a trip from Bassett over to like the Atkinson area and finding a group of whooping cranes on a big wet meadow.
Yeah.
That's the earliest I can remember.
How about here on this place?
Well, after both of these stories, there was a lot of years where I was away and just got phone calls that there were whooping cranes here, and I never got to see them.
Yeah.
I don't know if I recall the first time I saw whooping cranes here, but it wouldn't have been that long ago.
Well, I sure remember you telling me, you had left Audubon to come back to raise your family here, and you had sent me a note saying, get whooping cranes here once in a while if you're ever interested, let me know. And I didn't forget about you or that, but life goes the way that it does. And we've got a whole text string in my phone here about whooping cranes this year
Right.
that were here, because they were here a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really a neat deal this year. So we see whooping cranes pretty often, and they're usually here for a day or two or a few days. This year we had a family of 3 whooping cranes, 2 adults and a juvenile, that showed up in late March and were here for 21 days.
Goodness sakes.
And actually the day that they showed up in the afternoon, or that we first noticed them in the afternoon, we had a pair of whooping cranes that we saw that morning, a separate pair that left that day. We never saw them again. And then late afternoon, this family group showed up, and it was in the middle of calving. And we calve out our main bunch of cows right here below the house next to the river. And so we were feeding every morning. And so
Every
for
night.
yeah, and so for almost a month, we had to see where the whooping cranes were, and
Tried to
they're in the
avoid 'em
way.
a little bit.
We better wait a while, or wait till they leave the hay, or. But it was pretty fun, and they did not move around much at all.
What was their rhythm of the day every day?
Well, they'd be in the cornfield for a good amount of time, and then they'd be in the river. And then when we didn't see them there, they'd go just south here a little ways, and then they'd always be back.
Yep.
And about every day they were in the river and out in the field working, back and forth.
When they would go south, were they using a neighbor's, or is it a little WRE?
It's actually Cammie and Matt, our
Okay.
sister and brother-in-law. They own a property just to the south here that he restored with the Wetland Reserve Program.
Okay.
And so it has some open water slough in there, and they spent some time over there, especially we had a bunch of real windy days while they were here, and it seemed like they kind of preferred being over there on those real windy days versus out here in the open. But yeah, they moved. I mean, Mom and Dad could see them basically. They were either right here on the river where they could see, or right here in the cornfield
Yeah.
that whole time. And as far as the way they moved around during the day, it was kind of interesting. You know, down there on the Platte, sandhill cranes, they come and stay for a few weeks. And when they first get here, they're spending a lot of time feeding. And then by the end of their stay here, you start to notice them just staying on the river, sort of waiting for the right weather to leave. And that's kind of what these whooping cranes did too. Like the last week they were here, they spent a lot more time on the river. And there was a lot of days when we thought for sure they were going to leave. Sandhill cranes going over, but they kept staying. I texted you at least once that, they left today.
They left. Yeah, I remember that. Oh, sorry. Nope, they didn't.
And then the next day I had to text you again and say, no, they're still here.
Well, they had a chick with them, right? So did you notice anything about the behavior of the chick that was different than the behavior of the parents? Because this chick is now about 10 months old or so while it's here and getting big. And
Well, what I noticed was I imagine the male, when he was out in the river, he was dancing all the time. He was jumping up in the air and
cool.
Flapping
And
his wings.
flapping, and
Yeah.
he did that a lot.
Yeah. Did you ever do that for Donna?
No,
Maybe on your 50th that'll come
well,
out.
that might be pretty hard to get.
Do you know much about whooping cranes and how they take care of that chick that first year?
No, I don't.
Yeah. So they'll have 2 chicks a year, typically. And they're nesting clear up probably about 1,500 miles north of here in a place called Wood Buffalo National Park. And those chicks are born in early June, and usually only one will survive to make it on migration all the way south down to the Texas Gulf Coast. And then if they make it down there, there's a pretty good chance they'll probably make it back up north. But Mom and Dad are teaching that chick everything. There's not a lot of instinct in those birds in terms of where to go or what to do or anything like that. They learn everything from Mom and Dad. So when you had the birds here with that chick had been with Mom and Dad and never out of sight of Mom and Dad for those 10 months. But when it left here, somewhere between here and the time they get back up to their nesting grounds, and it usually is not until they get up into Canada and get close, that bird separates from its parents. And then it's on its own. Completely. And Mom and Dad go and nest or build another generation, and that chick needs to find its own way in life, and it usually finds others that are in a similar predicament, and they sort of hang around in teenage gangs, if you will, and they've got no mortgage to pay or no kids to take care of or any responsibilities except just to survive. So it's pretty cool that your place here provided, if they stayed here for 3 weeks, they felt comfortable. And as much as you were watching them, they were watching you. And, you were in your rhythm of your day, just like they were in their rhythm of their day. And if they didn't like it here, they would have left. And then you also provided them with a little bit more opportunity for that chick to be comfortable and build up their reserves so that when they get up to their nesting grounds in Wood Buffalo, usually by early May, it's still cold. Everything could still be iced over, and they just have to sort of rely on those reserves that they have till ice out happens and all that. So that's a pretty cool deal. So I do know you've thought a little bit about these birds over the years. Did you know that the birds that you had here were birds that I'd photographed before?
Andy was telling
There's
us.
Donna.
Yeah. Did you know that there's a picture in the book of them?
That's what he told us.
Have you looked at it yet?
Yeah, well, he showed it to me.
Okay, yeah. So we're going to look at this. So it's on page 36, 37. So that's mom and dad. Now that obviously is a chick from a previous year. I photographed this in the winter of 2019, 2020. So this was about 4 chicks ago.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that each of these birds have bands on them. And you can't really see mom's because it's covered up, but that's the male, this guy. And these two winter in an area on Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. So if you look on a map, you see Rockport, Texas, which is sort of halfway between Corpus Christi and Houston. This is the general area where they winter, but they have a particular territory on their wintering grounds that they protect. It's about 500 acres, so it's a pretty big chunk. And it's on a point called Dunham Point. And I have friends, Kevin and Lori, that live down there that own land, but they also are fishing guides, and they also guide people on bird tours and whooping crane tours from their small boat, which would be great for you guys to go to sometime. And they see these birds almost every winter. And so this was the first whooping cranes I photographed somewhere other than Nebraska, down in Texas, and it was the first family that I ever saw. And I was with Kevin and Lori on their boat and saw these guys first thing in the morning. And these two I've flown over their nesting grounds. I've actually seen them on their nest in a place called the Sass River Watershed in Wood Buffalo National Park, which is about the size of 5 Yellowstones. That's how big that place is. So, it's one of the largest national parks in the entire world, and there's just one road. So it's vast northern wilderness, so it's pretty cool to connect the dots between those birds down there wintering to be at your place here, and then think about them up there. And each of these, since they have telemetry, there's really good histories that show where these birds have been, because the telemetry keeps track of these birds' movements every few minutes throughout
So are
the
they
year.
marked when they're just young, like when they're up in
Yeah, that's a
Canada?
good question. So they will mark these birds both on their wintering grounds. They'll capture them on their wintering grounds when they're either adults or juveniles this age, or they'll do it up on their nesting grounds when the chicks are not quite ready to fly yet. They're about 2 months old or so, and they'll mark them up there too. So up north in Wood Buffalo, it's flying over in a helicopter. They identify a spot down there where there's a pair of birds with a chick, and if the helicopter pilot thinks that he can land, then he'll set down and land, and then they've got less than a half an hour to find the chick, work the chick up, do all the stuff that needs to be done, pull a feather, do samples, take blood sample, all that stuff, and then they'll put the telemetry on and release the bird. Usually the parents maybe fly away, or else they'll walk away and just go watch from a distance, maybe the next marsh over. And then that chick reunites with the parents 100% of the time. Always has been, and that's pretty cool. Down south, what they do is they'll hide in blinds and they bait birds in with corn. And they set up what they call a ring of fire, which is actually a big noose that they bury in sand. And then they sit back in a blind, and the bird comes in to start feeding on that corn, and it's the right bird that they want. Then they'll fire the trigger, and that thing will clamp around their leg and hold them there, and the biologist will run out, get the bird and work them up and then put the band on and the telemetry and then let them go. And so they've been doing this now for 13, 14 years. I think that part of the project is winding down. I think they've got enough information now out of these birds. I think there's roughly 540 whooping cranes in the wild today. And I can't remember how many have had telemetry on them over the years, but it's enough of a sample size, probably over 10%, that they've got a pretty good handle now exactly where these birds go, what kind of habitats they need along the way, how they live their lives. And the dark hole in the research for a long time was, what about those chicks? What do they do? How closely tied are they to mom and dad? And then when they separate, when do they separate? And how do they fare? Because if they make it the first year, then they've got to make it through that second year. If they make it through that second year, then they're probably going to make it to adulthood. They've learned what they needed to learn and they're healthy. So between that first and second year that a lot of this science has helped uncover more of the story. So I saw a picture, Andrew sent another picture of yours, Donna, I think. That's what looked like to be a bird with a band on it that had white, red, and white. And I think you said it was from 2015 or so.
I wrote it down here. Yep.
Yeah.
April 2015.
So I'm opening up the Whooping Crane book again here. And that bird, Donna, is this bird.
I didn't know we ever got close enough to see a band on it.
It's blurry, but you can see it.
Yeah. So this is a bird that I nicknamed Husker Red because of the white, red, and white.
Yeah.
And this was photographed down in Texas. Got a big fish. They normally don't eat big fish. That's a mullet. But what happened there was in the winter of 21, 22, I believe it was, Texas got really cold, really fast. And it came so fast that a lot of the fish in the shallow bays down on the Gulf Coast got stuck. And not a lot of them died, but they got cold shocked. And so whooping cranes, what they typically eat down there on their wintering grounds consists of a lot of crabs, blue crabs especially, berries called wolfberries that look like cranberries almost, and then other sorts of crustaceans like razor clams. And as my friend Liz Smith says, they'll eat what's in front of them. But these were like big porterhouse steaks out there floating because all of a sudden they could eat a giant fish and have maybe one or two of those a day and they're good, you know. So that was really fascinating to watch her. I've photographed this bird more than I've photographed any other whooping crane in the 6 years or so that I've worked on him. And she appears in this book a couple more times. I'll go to one more, which is up on the nesting grounds. We put a remote camera next to her and her mate's nest while I was working with researchers on something else they were doing, putting remote cameras out. So here she is, sitting on her nest with eggs. Isn't that cool? And the camera that we put out there was a time-lapse camera. So we had programmed the camera to take pictures every 5 minutes, every day throughout that entire nesting season. So we have, I don't know how many, a couple thousand images of the entire thing playing out. Started with the wetland being pretty open, you know, with a lot of water around it, to when they actually hatched the chicks and left, it grew up so fast like that, you know, just in about 35 days or so. So it's really cool to see that you've had a couple birds on this place that you just don't know, but I know too.
Yeah.
And probably some other people now too.
Yeah.
I'd like Husker Red to be on the big Husker Vision deal at Memorial Stadium, flying through into the state as part of the opening. That's like my goal before I'm dead, is to get that to happen.
That'd be neat.
Yeah.
So, how, I think I was asking Andrew, how old do these birds normally get?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. The cranes live long lives. So they're like elephants, they're like whales, they're like bears. They can live 20, 30, 40 years in the wild. Now, it's rare for them to live 40, but when I was down in Texas a couple of years ago, we spotted a bird with a single silver band on her leg. And the person I was with, biologist, been watching those birds for a long time. She checked and she said the only place that that band could have come from was from a small banding operation that was done back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
And that was back in 2022. So that bird had to be in its 40s. And if you do the math, the flight between Wood Buffalo National Park and the Gulf Coast of Texas is about 2,500 miles. You times that by 2, that's 5,000. You times that by, let's just say 40, just for kicks, and you're talking about a bird that's traveled at least 200,000 miles in her lifetime, at least, and maybe much longer. The oldest crane known to us in the Western world was a crane that lived to be over 80 years old. It wasn't a whooping crane. It was another crane called a Siberian crane, which is a white crane, just like the whoopers are, but live over in Asia. But can you imagine that? And they're one of the oldest surviving bird species on the planet. They've been around in this form long before we have, really something.
I was thinking back when she took that picture that there was only like between 100 and maybe 150 of those birds.
Yeah.
So they were saying that it was close to 10% of the population at the time she took that picture.
Yeah, it's a pretty special picture. They got down, the numbers in the 1940s was their low point. They had 15 birds that showed up in the wintertime down on the Texas Gulf Coast at this Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. And then they had 5 birds that were over in Cajun country over in Louisiana. And that was it. And at the time, they didn't know where those last remaining birds nested. So it's very safe to say that it was less than 20 birds left in the wild in the 1940s. And then once they discovered where they nested in the early 1950s. Guys were fighting a fire up in northern Canada and happened to look down and saw 2 white birds on the nest. They'd been looking for decades, but that's where they were left. And then from that point, there was a pretty strong education campaign up and down the Great Plains to tell people about these birds and how rare they were. And then they did a lot of work in rural communities, going out and posting flyers saying what they were and not to shoot them, and sending out cards, report, if you see these birds, please report them in and tell us what you're seeing, what behavior you see, and what time you saw them. And they were able then to reconstruct the history. But historically, these birds primarily nested in the prairies. They were prairie birds first. They had the outlier population in Wood Buffalo National Park, clear up in northern Canada, but that wasn't the core of their range. They were just the ones that survived. So pretty neat deal today, because to go from, around 20, less than 20, to now about 540 in this wild population through the Great Plains. It's increasing at about 4% a year. And it's mostly because people like you, frankly, because you provide them habitat and a place to be. And then these little programs like the Wetland Reserve Program and other conservation programs aren't the giant national parks or refuge system, but are these smaller conservation programs today. Every bit of it matters. And these birds are a lot more resilient, I think, than people think. You just got to give them a chance. You can't shoot them, and you can't put power lines right in front of the places that they need the most of. And so that's conversations that continue on today, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you all are from here and raised here, and this river isn't just next to you, it's in you. This river is the water that you are in your bellies there, right? What do you see and what do you think about when you think about this place, and not just for your family, but for other life here? What does it feel like to you to have a place for wildlife?
Well, I guess it's really all I've known, for one thing.
Yeah.
And put your whole life into trying to build something, put it together, and I just want to pass it on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, in our earlier days, Conn was a big deer hunter, but then when you have them in your yard, and it's kind of hard to shoot them after that. And so, it's just kind of nice to have the wildlife around, and they can come here because we don't shoot at them.
Yeah.
So,
what's it mean to you, Andrew? I mean, you've made a choice to come back here and be here and raise your family and be with your folks and be with this place.
Well, I enjoyed my childhood being on the farm and, all of the fun things that come with it, but also being on the farm with my grandparents who were here, and we wanted that for our kids too. Have them here and work alongside and know their grandparents and be able to enjoy all the spoils of the landscape that we live and work in. So it was something that we hadn't really planned on doing, but once we had kids and just decided that we wanted to come home. And I mean, I get the benefit of a lot of hard work from mom and dad and their parents and their parents. And so, you know, I sort of am the benefactor of a lot of hard work, and now I get to come get the good stuff out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope one way or another, whether our kids or my sister's kids end up farming or don't, I hope that this place is still here and they have that same sort of connection to place where they can come back and enjoy the fun stuff, or come back and do the hard work and get everything out of it that I have.
Do you have a favorite spot out here?
Oh, well,
If you could go to like one spot, say this is my favorite spot,
yeah,
take me there.
I have a couple.
Okay.
And mostly it comes from childhood memories. So down here to the east along the river, we have a farm pond. There's a really old homestead site down there. Nothing is left except for the pond. And I remember going fishing all the time there as a kid. And now in the last couple years, we've dredged it out again and restocked it. And so last weekend, me and my kids went down and did some fishing there. So that's one spot. And then we grew up in a house just down the road here, and there's a creek that runs through there toward the river. And I remember exploring that a lot as a kid. And that's still one of my favorite spots to go down in the last stretch of that creek before it makes it to the river. It's just wooded and dark, and
Look for mushrooms.
yeah, that's one of my mushroom spots. And
Secret's out now.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And it's
those
a-
are two places.
Spring-fed creek that
Runs all year.
all the time.
How about you, Conn?
Oh, I don't know.
Right up here in the chair looking out.
About 20 feet away here? Yeah, I don't blame you,
I
man.
enjoy being on the river,
Yeah.
probably as much as anything.
Yeah.
And if I had something that I enjoy about as much as anything, is calving
Yeah.
in the spring.
Yeah. What do you enjoy about calving? What's that?
Just having
'Cause-
new baby calves running around
Yeah.
and seeing them.
Yeah.
That's my part.
That's when I first met you. You were doing that.
Yep.
And you had everybody came out okay this year. Except
Yep.
one cold night, but other than
Yeah.
that, that's about it.
We had a really good calving season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Donna, favorite spot out here?
Well, one thing I guess we didn't say when we moved this house up here and added on to it, it was a prairie chicken lick.
Oh, a pier was,
Yes.
huh? Really?
And they stayed around for a couple years, and
Yeah.
we would have them just dancing right out here or right out in the back in the yard.
But on your roof, were they on your
Yes.
Yeah.
They would fly
We got
up.
pictures
Yeah.
of them going
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
and down that building over there,
Yeah.
dancing.
Well, when I came up here in March, or April it was, I guess, briefly for a half a day, the first thing I saw was prairie chicken. Then I saw sharp-tailed grouse. Then I saw a pheasant. Then I saw a badger. And this was all within about a half a mile of each other. And man, just the amount of bird life out here is crazy.
We used to have pheasants really good.
Yeah.
Back when I was in school and stuff. Just don't have very many pheasants anymore. We have too many predators, I think. Too many raccoons and skunks and stuff. And of course, the habitat's probably not as good for them as it used to be. But
Well, things are always changing, aren't they?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
If you could look forward, what's 50 years from now? What does this place look like? What do you hope it looks like?
well, I hope it hasn't changed terribly. I hope it stays somewhat this way.
Yeah.
I just kind of believe in the diverse part of it, having the cattle and the crops and being able to do pretty much what we've done for 50 years. And I hope it can somewhat stay that way and not go the route that a lot of things are going and nobody's out here and it's all people doing 3,000-4,000 acres at a time instead of the family farm.
Donna's culture changed locally around here, or is it, you feel like, pretty solid here?
Yeah, we're pretty out in the middle of nowhere and not much change, but
Yeah.
I hope we're still living here and looking out and seeing everything we can see. So it's very relaxing to live this way. So.
What's it feel like, Andrew, you and your sister, to be the inheritors of this land? And what does it mean for you to think that you're going to continue to be able to look out over this river and see these white birds in the future?
I feel really lucky to come into the situation that I have gotten to come into, and nothing of my own doing. It's a lot of hard work in the past. And so, I hope that I can do all of that hard work justice. My 50-year vision is the same. I hope that not much changes in that amount of time, and that my kids get to be my age and they can make their own choice if they want to be here on the farm or not. And if they're not, then I hope it's still here for them to come home to on holidays and get the same things that I've gotten to in little doses at least. But yeah, it's pretty nice to get up in the morning and come to work.
Yeah.
I come over the hill and I get the big view of the river and most of the farm, and it's a pretty good way to start your work day every day.
Well, I got a pretty good feeling that that'll be just that way. Look on the wall there and see the entire family tree, and you're going to need a bigger wall. And I also think that, Donna, you got a nice Hawksmoth picture over there too, and I think
That was Andrew.
Oh, that's Andrew's. Oh, I didn't even know you photographed Andrew. Some more room, I think, for pictures of wildlife too, and maybe another picture of whooping cranes someday. So, I'm really glad to be able to spend a little bit of time with you today, and got you augured in these chairs here. I knew it took some convincing, maybe. So it's been wonderful. And cool thing about cranes is that because they travel these long distances and people care about them and love them, and they don't just connect habitats up and down the flyways that they need to survive, but they also connect people. And they've helped Andrew, you and I reconnect again. And now I've gotten to know Donna and Conn, so appreciate that too. I might have to twist your arm and come up here sometime and sit and drink a cup of coffee. And what way is that again? East. Watch the sunrise.
Well, anytime you come up, maybe later this summer or in the summer, maybe we'll have the boat out and
Oh, that'd be
go
fun.
up and down the river.
Yeah, that, in all my years of working in Nebraska, doing the job that I do not believe I've ever been on the Loop River. Been on the North Loop, way up higher in the watershed, and put my feet in the South Loop, but I've never been on the Loop. So I think this will be the place that I need to do that first. So, all right. Well, thank you, Andrew, Donna, and Conn, for sharing your place with us and your stories. Your presence out here is important, and having you in this community of stewards in this state is good for all of us, and it's good for the birds. It's been my pleasure spending time with you today, and I'm sure our paths will continue to cross in future migration seasons. These are the Whooping Crane Chronicles. Thank you for joining.